So today I just wanted to take a quick look at the 1985 film Fright Night. This was the directorial debut of Tom Holland. He is possibly better known for directing Psycho 2. He also did Child's Play and Thinner. So definitely an entertaining film. In all honesty, this one did take time to grow on me. I had seen it as a kid. I really didn't give it much thought, but the first time I rewatched it, I was in my late teens. I hated the movie. I didn't think it too entertaining. The character of Evil was just annoying, so I could not stand the story for some odd reason. I just could not get into it. And I'm assuming, just as I've said, Evil was just a very obnoxious character. He just ran me right up the wall. For me, another major distraction, which I think is an obvious one, is of course Amanda Bierce. I cannot look at her without thinking Marcy Rhodes or Marcy Darcy. Obviously Married with Children was a show that I watched a lot growing up, and it's just very hard for me even now just to watch the movie and be like, hey Marcy. But you know, she's a good actress. She does well in the role. It's just for some reason that one character or persona is just very cemented in my mind. So the second time I rewatched the film was years later. I cannot remember how long ago it was, but it was actually the third attempt, which was sometime last year, that I rewatched the film, and I'm like, hey, this is a pretty good movie. You know, and I think it's unfortunate in my case that it took me so long for the movie to regrow on me, because I did enjoy it as a child. I have no idea why I turned on it in my late teens, but I was finally, eventually, once again able to enjoy the film all over again, so I'm at least grateful for that. This film also does feature one of my favorite film posters, the snaggle-toothed vampire looming over the house. I just think that is just such an awesome poster. It's just very cool. Obviously the design itself when it's presented in the film, obviously it was very last minute, but it wound up becoming extremely iconic. And of course you do see it at various points in the film, so they did get use out of that prop. It is a little bit cheesy and over the top looking, but it works. Of course you do have the story of young Charlie. He suspects his next door neighbor of being a vampire, and of course, lo and behold, he is. But nobody will believe him. You know, he pretty much is just going out of his way to, you know, tell everyone, hey, this is a vampire. But the whole premise of the film just very much reminds me of Rear Window. Obviously, you have James Stewart's character in the film in very much the same scenario. He witnesses a murder and he just cannot prove it, and no one will believe him. So I definitely do notice a parallel, but it's actually the true inspiration for this actually came from The Boy Who Cried Wolf. So I mean, I can see that. It's not the first thing that came to mind when I rewatched this last time. This is also considered one of the more successful films of 1985. It came in second to A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, which not my favorite film in the franchise, but you know, it even just coming in second, that is not bad at all. A thing that was not known to me at all, which I can totally see now, you do have the character of Peter Vincent. He was based on Vincent Price, and Mr. Price was originally intended to have played the character. Obviously, Roddy McDowall took the role, and he saw the character as just more of a hammy third-class actor rather than, you know, some you know, awesome actor with a great presence. And his hammy role actually, in my opinion, just really helps the movie. It definitely gives it those lighter moments. It keeps the film from getting too stiff. But Peter Vincent obviously is very much a name in reference to Vincent Price. You've got the reversed initials, of course, Vincent Price, Peter Vincent. But you know, I guess to a lot of people that may have been an obvious reference. It just never dawned on me. But of course, as I said, I spent so many years just trying to give this film a chance to grow on me. And it taking several attempts, obviously that's not something that I would have caught. Of course, roughly 4 years later, there was a Hindi remake. I really wouldn't call it a remake, it's more of a blatant rip-off of Fright Night. So this film, Voki Baccarat, I'm pretty sure I mispronounced that, was released in 1989. I honestly could not find a dubbed or subtitled version of the film, so I pretty much just hung around just looking at the pretty pictures and trying to make sense. Obviously, the more notable scenes are total exact copies. What I found very interesting here is the beginning or the intro segment. You kind of have this whole Mary and Joseph thing going on, where you've got a pregnant woman in a carriage or a wagon, and she goes into labor. So the impression I get here is just right off the bat, you've got this kid that just shoots out of her business, and he's pretty much just born living the vampire life. Obviously not a normal child, but I don't know if that's just kind of like what would you say, the introduction to this character. My only speculation here is that he was potentially born this way because he was born out of wedlock. I honestly, once again, would not know. I'm just kind of trying to fill in the blanks here as well as entertain myself. But one of the things here that I found very interesting is the vampire's hypnotic stare. You've got these crazy little laser doodles shooting out of his eyes, and you've got these sci-fi sound effects that are just kind of going on as these little eye doodles are shooting from him right into his victim's eyes, which of course implies they are now under his power. So it's actually within this eye doodle scene. You've got this mirrored ball that is kind of like hung up on the ceiling of the club. It kind of gives it this whole disco feel, especially with the way everyone's dressed. But to me, it feels more like a version of Scarface that I'm watching rather than Fright Night, which I found very interesting here. It just kind of threw me off a bit, kind of like, what movie am I watching here? What's going on? But yeah, unfortunately, this film really does drag on. There's a bit of a love story. There are, you know, some differences that are added in here and there. Obviously, I didn't care enough to pay attention because obviously the fact that it dragged on, it was boring, and I just didn't know what the devil was going on. But this movie was just 2 hours too long. From what I ran across, very many people are not fond of this version of the film, which you know, may potentially be unfortunate, but it was still an interesting watch nonetheless. So let's go ahead and jump over and take a look at Fright Night Part 2. This was released in 1988, and essentially 1 year before the Hindi remake of Fright Night. And this is actually my favorite this is actually my favorite film between the two. Obviously, I'm a lot more familiar with this one as a child. Maybe people do not care for this one too much, but I definitely enjoy this one a lot more, which is unfortunate that the film only had a very limited DVD release. It has not been re-released to my knowledge, which I hope at least happens at least once during my lifetime, because I would love to own an actual copy of this rather than a bootleg or just having to go to YouTube every single time I want to see this. Obviously, the DVD release of this film was considered more of a direct VHS transfer and a very poor copy. So maybe that's part of why the DVD just really pretty much got buried. I wouldn't know. But it is very unfortunate, of course, for those who do own copies of the film. It is very much a coveted collector's item now. But this film takes place 3 years after the events from the first film. Charlie is now in college. He's taken great pains to forget the events that have occurred in the first film and just pretty much move on with his life. Unbeknownst to him, he's actually being actively pursued by a vampiress. This would be Regine Dandridge, of course, sister of Jerry Dandridge, and she wants to avenge her brother, which she, to a degree, almost does succeed in. She attempts to gradually turn Charlie into a vampire. He does experience symptoms. And of course, once again, Peter Vincent does get pulled back into the picture. They take the vampires out, but for me, my favorite scene, or rather the scene that just makes the entire film, is the intro scene with Regine dancing at the club, where she's wearing her red dress. She passes the whole thing as performance art, and she's essentially, I guess you could say, seducing. But this one scene itself is just damn sexy. I have never seen anything that comes in comparison to it. You know, extremely very well done. And it's the one scene that always comes to mind when I think Fright Night 2. Of course, you do have the iconic poster, but to me, this scene in regards to the film is everything. It's amazing. But of course, you do have Regine and her gang of goons, and of course they're carrying out her work for her. But does Regine actually meet her goal? Quite honestly and very sadly, do vampires ever get happy endings? Very rarely. Not often enough, in my opinion. But there was an attempt at a third installment to the Fright Night series. Of course, for those of you who are already in the know, this did not come to pass because of the murder of live entertainment chairperson Jose Menendez and his wife Mary. So they were murdered by their two sons, obviously little money-hungry jerks, which of course not only ruined their lives, but they ruined the potential at a third film. Obviously the plans for the third installment were never picked back up, but this would have been a 1990 release had things worked out. So of course this brings us to the 2011 remake of Fright Night, and my main gripe about this is the horrible CGI. The story really isn't too strong. You have a very attractive young lady playing the part of Amy in this film. Obviously Charlie and his best friend Evil are just total dorks, and it's I kind of, first time watching this, I found myself wondering, she has to be playing like some mean girl scheme, like she's trying to set him up for something, because she is definitely way out of his league. But no, apparently she really does care for this little dweeb. So obviously miracles do happen, but the story, to myself, in my opinion, just doesn't seem as strong. It's a very weak story. Once again, the CG is just very distracting. It's used too much, in my opinion. Of course, I guess you could say the offset here is the fact that Colin Farrell is playing the evil vampire Jerry. He's definitely easy on the eyes. Why on earth he decided to do this film, I have no idea, because to my understanding, he was still somewhat of a big name in 2011. So, you know, I just wonder to myself, why did he not choose a better film to participate in? I don't know, maybe he just owed someone a favor, but it pretty much just does follow the basic storyline of the original. He discovers his next door neighbor is a vampire. He's trying to protect his mother and girlfriend. I like the sleaziness of the Dandridge character in this, kind of like how he tries to weasel his way into being invited into the home. Obviously, Charlie has already been notified, so he does not let him anywhere near the house. And Jerry just kind of gives him a very subtle threat to watch out for his mother and his girlfriend, because they are very attractive women. So of course in this one we have the added mythology of Peter Vincent actually not being a TV show host slash vampire hunter. He's more of a, I guess you could say, David Blaine, Chris Angel, illusionist or magician type character, which I really don't find too interesting or appealing, but I do understand that the characters had to be updated in order to appeal to modern day audiences. Of course, he turns out to be a total fraud. Yes, he did have a vampire experience as a young man, and he pretty much just wussed out after that. Of course, he does make an attempt to step up eventually once being approached by Charlie and do the right thing by him in helping him. But it's just kind of like this whole parallel between him going to, you know, like badass illusionist to like really scaredy cat guy. So in this film we've got Peter Vincent the fraud, Charlie the dweeb, and Amy the fox. So the ending sequence in this, of course, because Vampire Jerry does get a hold of Amy, she gets dragged back to his lair, but I like the fact that they try to develop his character a bit more. He's described as being part of a very tribal or primitive species of Greek vampire, which essentially makes him very hard to kill. But for me, the main curiosity here actually happens to be with Jerry's home. He purchased the house next door, so you don't have much furniture because it's implied he recently moved in. He hasn't really been there for too long, but already there's a segment in his house which is already set up as essentially a vampire refrigerator. You open a secret door, you walk in, and there are holding cells for live victims, obviously in order to maintain fresh blood. So for me, that was actually the major loophole here, because it had been implied that he hadn't been living there long, but that type of setup, you know, essentially really isn't that quick to just pop up and get done. And I doubt the previous owners, you know, had a human livestock storage, unless, you know, they were just really into crazy bondage stuff. But once again, that is not discussed in the film. So to me, it's just a major loophole. Like the first time I saw this, I was like, wait, huh, what? But okay, fine, whatever. It's a movie. Let's just go with it. But the ending sequence of the film obviously takes place in an underground cavern. You have various other primitive vampires that dig their way out of the earth, because apparently they nest right in the ground. They're not the classy sort that sleep in coffins here. So of course this moves us into the 2013 direct-to-video sequel, Fright Night 2, New Blood. In this version, it's pretty much just treated as a standalone, or I guess you could say somewhat of a retrospective continuity. They're pretty much pretending that the events of the first film never occurred. So it's very much a standalone sequel. You do not need to see the first remake in order to know what's going on here, because they're pretty much rewriting the whole thing and pretending that the first film never happened. So in this version, I really don't like the way that the characters are portrayed. You do have Charlie and Evil, they come back, but they're more of like the jock or the popular in-crowd type of guys. And of course you once again have Amy. Apparently they're broken up because Charlie cheated on Amy. Obviously, if you've seen the first one, your first thought would be, how the devil did that even happen? But of course, once again, the characters are completely different, just recycled names. We do have Peter Vincent that makes a comeback, and we have Jerry Dandridge. In this version, she is a very sexy instructor. So the kids are off studying abroad. I'm assuming they are in college by this point. And they seem to be studying a lot of the Romanian folklore of the area that they are visiting. So I'm not too sure if this is like some cultural study course or what the deal here may be. But very early on, once again, Charlie discovers that Jerry is a vampire when he happens to be peeping in on a girl-on-girl scene. The following day, he discovers that this sexy lady is his new teacher. I doubt he's hot for teacher at this point in the film, but she definitely enjoys toying with him, altering his perception, just kind of freezing time and speaking to him on a one-on-one basis just to taunt him. We soon discover that she is actually Countess Bathory. So of course, as tradition holds, she must bathe in the blood of young women in order to maintain her youth, which she very much does. In one scene, you have this tired old crone who slits the throat of a young lady and marinades in some fruit punch for a little bit and emerges a beautiful young woman. So to me, that scene really wasn't necessary because they've already told us she is Bathory. We really don't need to see the routine because we pretty much, by this point in time, know how it goes, especially if you watch vampire films. You just know how it is. But they go ahead and show us really not too bad a scene. I mean, it's not gory or graphic, but it's very well done. It's not cheesy or anything. So there is a fair amount of blood there, and of course the whole hypnotism aspect of this. The film obviously is filled with a generous amount of boobies very early on, and through a fair amount of the film as well. But decent acting for a direct-to-video film, good acting, good lighting. The story isn't perfect, but at least they don't have those god-awful digital effects that were overused in the first film, so I will give them credit for that. It may have been due to the fact that they didn't have the budget for it, but I am thankful for that, especially the fact that it forced them to go the practical route. You do have some CG here and there, but I'm glad that it was minimal. Of course, once again, this story does end with a showdown in a underground cavern or pit, but apparently in this story, Bathory was cursed. So apparently she has to bathe in the blood of a virgin who was born at midnight on the harvest moon. Of course, this happens to be Amy. It's just all too perfect. Bathory has wandered the earth very much in Cain mode, trying to find peace and of course just gobbling up whoever to remain alive. In the meantime, of course, upon returning to Romania, her homeland, she finds this chosen one, which of course winds up being her undoing. Honestly, I have trouble deciding whether or not I like the first one or the second remake a lot more. There are definitely aspects of the second one that I do enjoy a lot better, but once again, I do not like this retrospective continuity approach that they applied here. That did irk me quite a bit. Both, in my opinion, are not really treated as very strong stories, so they are far from being perfect films, but they are doable. Very much if you're just looking to kill time, have something to watch, look at some very attractive women, then I would say go with the second one. You will not be let down, literally. But that is all I have for you guys today, and I will talk to you later.